Was Jesus of Nazareth a real man, or humanity's greatest literary creation? For many, faith is enough. But for science, faith is not sufficient proof. In recent years, however, the land of Israel has begun to speak. Stones buried for 2 millennia, records from historians who detested Christianity, and everyday objects have risen from the ashes to tell a different story. Today we will examine 7 pieces of physical and historical evidence that prove, beyond a doubt, that the man called Jesus not only existed, but left an indelible mark on the structure of the Roman Empire. Test 1. The testimony of the enemies, Flavius, Josephus, and Tacitus. Our first stop isn't a church, but the archives in Rome and Jerusalem. Skeptics often say, but the Bible was written by followers of Jesus. They're suspect. That's understandable. So, let's look at those who didn't appreciate. Flavius Josephus was a Jewish historian who lived in the 1st century. In his book Antiquities of the Jews, written around 93 AD, he mentions Jesus not once, but twice. In one instance, he recounts the execution of James, whom he describes as the brother of Jesus, called Christ. It is important to note that Josephus was not a Christian. He was a Pharisee in the service of the Romans. He had no reason to invent a Messiah, but if you think Josephus is insufficient, let's look at Cornelius Tacitus, one of Rome's greatest historians. In recounting the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, Tacitus explains that the Emperor Nero blamed a group called Christians. Tacitus writes, literally, the name derives from Christ, who was executed by order of the procurator Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. Here we have a Roman senator who despised what he called Christian superstition, confirming 3 crucial facts: that Jesus existed, that he was executed by Pilate, and that this occurred precisely within the chronology described in the Bible. Secular history does not attempt to prove Jesus' divinity, but simply certifies his historical existence. 2. Pilate's stone. Until the mid-20th century, many scholars posed a bold challenge. If Jesus existed and was tried by a high-ranking Roman governor, where is the proof that this governor even existed? Many considered Pontius Pilate a fictional character created by the evangelist to add drama to the story. This changed in 1961 in the coastal city of Caesarea Maritima. Italian archaeologists were excavating an ancient Roman theater when they came across a limestone block that had been part of a step. Turning the stone over, they were in for a big surprise: a Latin inscription that read, "To the divine Augustus, this Tiberius, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea, dedicated." This was the first time Pilate's name had appeared in a contemporary archaeological record. Why is this important for proving Jesus' existence? Because it confirms the historical accuracy of the place where he lived. Archaeology has shown that the Gospel writers knew real administrative details about Judea that only someone who lived at that time could have known. If Pilate existed and was exactly where the Bible says he was, the picture is complete. 3. The Ossuary of Joseph Caiaphas. If the Pilate's stone we saw earlier confirmed the Roman authority behind Jesus' sentencing, our third piece of evidence takes us directly to the other side of the coin: the religious leadership of Jerusalem. For the biblical account to be historically accurate, the man who confronted Jesus in the heart of the temple must also have left a footprint, and that footprint was found entirely by chance. In 1990, workers constructing a park in Jerusalem, south of the Old City, opened a hole in the roof of a burial cave that had remained sealed for 2,000 years. Inside this chamber, archaeologists found 12 ossuaries, small stone boxes used to store the bones of the deceased after the body had decomposed. But one of these ossuaries was unlike anything the experts had ever seen. It was richly ornamented with geometric motifs and hand-carved rosettes, demonstrating that it belonged to someone of noble and extremely powerful lineage. On one side of that limestone box, an Aramaic inscription revealed what many doubted: Yehoseph bar Caiaphas, that is, Joseph, son of Caiaphas. We are talking about the high priest, who, according to accounts from the time, was the key figure in bringing Jesus before Pilate. Forensic anthropology has confirmed that the bones found belonged to a man of about 60 years old. the same age Caiaphas is estimated to have been at the height of his career. Finding Caiaphas's ossuary is like finding the missing piece of a historical puzzle. With Pilate's record, and now with the physical evidence of Caiaphas, the biblical story ceases to be a fairy tale and becomes a narrative of real events, starring real people in places we can still touch today. The stage is set, the Roman governor on one side and the Jewish high priest on the other. Both existed, and both were in Jerusalem at the same time as Jesus. 4. The Nazareth inscription. Our fourth piece of evidence leads us to a discovery that continues to intrigue historians and legal scholars to this day. Imagine a marble slab, about 60 centimeters high, found in Nazareth, the town where Jesus spent his childhood and youth. This piece, known as the Nazareth inscription, contains an imperial decree signed by a Roman emperor, probably Claudius, issued shortly after Jesus' death. What makes this decree extraordinary is not only its antiquity, but also its unusual and highly specific content. Unlike any other Roman law of the time, this edict establishes the death penalty for anyone who desecrates tombs, removes sealing stones, or, even more surprisingly, removes corpses with malicious intent. Let's examine this closely. The Roman Empire was a machine of order and law. Grave robbing was a common crime in antiquity, usually motivated by thieves seeking jewels and valuables left with the deceased. The usual punishment in Rome for this crime was a fine. Why, then, would the emperor change the law throughout the empire to punish with death anyone who desecrated corpses? And why would this decree be linked to the region of Nazareth? The logical answer points to the impact of the most important news of that century, the resurrection. As the Gospels and historical records indicate, Roman guards and local leaders claimed that the disciples had stolen Jesus' body to stage a miracle. The rumor about Jesus' empty tomb was so strong that it sparked a political crisis that reached Rome. The Nazareth inscription is the official reaction of the Roman state to this event. It demonstrates that, just a few years after the crucifixion, a real and dangerous debate was already underway regarding the disappearance of the body of a man from Nazareth. This marble plaque bears witness to the upheaval Jesus caused within the Roman system. It is proof that something unprecedented occurred in a tomb in Judea, forcing the most powerful man in the world to change the laws in an attempt to stop the spread of the story of a carpenter. 5. On the boat in Galilee. To understand the fifth piece of evidence, we must go back to 1986, when a rare climatic phenomenon led to one of the greatest discoveries in biblical archaeology. Israel was suffering a devastating drought, and the level of the Sea of Galilee dropped to levels not seen for centuries, exposing vast stretches of mud that had previously been invisible. It was in this context that two brothers, fishermen, and amateur archaeologists named Moshe and Yuval Lufan were walking along the northwest shore of the lake when they spotted the outline of a wooden beam protruding from the mud. What they didn't know was that they had just discovered a 2,000-year-old time capsule. The rescue operation that followed was a true race against time. As soon as the wood was exposed to the air, it risked disintegrating in a matter of minutes due to oxidation. The archaeologists needed unprecedented ingenuity. They wrapped the fragile hull of the ship in a kind of cocoon of expanded polyurethane foam. This material hardened, protecting the wood and allowing the nearly 8-meter-long vessel to float on the water like a block of polystyrene until it was transferred to a conservation tank, where it remained submerged in liquid wax for 11 long years to ensure its preservation. It is essential to maintain scientific honesty. Archaeology does not claim that this boat belonged to Jesus or his disciples. There are no engraved names or direct proof of ownership. However, this object constitutes overwhelming contextual evidence. Carbon-14 dating and analysis of construction techniques have confirmed that it sailed between 50 BC and 70 AD. It was built with 12 different types of wood, suggesting that fishermen of the time lived by reusing materials, just as the Gospels describe the humble lives of the apostles. The boat is precisely sized to accommodate a group of approximately 13 people, demonstrating that the biblical accounts of crossings on the lake were not geographical legends, but accurate descriptions of the nautical technology of the time. This is not a magical relic, but the physical setting that confirms that Jesus' life unfolded in a rigorously real environment. 6. The Pool of Bethesda. Our sixth piece of evidence takes us to a place that, for almost 2,000 years, has been considered proof that the Gospel of John was a work of theological fiction. In chapter 5, John describes a healing place called the Pool of Bethesda, located near the Sheep Gate. He is remarkably precise. He says that the pool was surrounded by 5 porticos, that is, 5 corridors covered by stone columns. For centuries, scholars attacked this account. They argued that pentagonal pools did not exist in Israelite architecture, and that the number 5 was simply a metaphor John used to refer to the 5 books of the Law of Moses, which could not heal man, while Jesus could. Bethesda was considered an imaginary, but the earth held a silent answer. In 1888, during excavations for the restoration of the Church of Santana, archaeologist Conrad Schick began unearthing something of enormous dimension, almost 15 meters below the current street level. To the astonishment of the scientific community, he found a complex of rectangular pools, but with a unique feature. A stone pedestal divided the pool in half, creating 4 porticos around it, and a 5th portico running through its center. This discovery demonstrated that the author of the Gospel possessed a precise knowledge of Jerusalem that vanished completely after its Roman destruction in 70 CE. No one could have invented this architectural detail centuries later in another land. The stones of Bethesda confirm that John was describing a real scene where the sick from all over the country gathered in search of hope, just as the Bible recounts. 7. To the Pool of Siloam. While the discovery at Bethesda was the result of an archaeological dig, our 7th piece of evidence emerged from a common accident of modern engineering that brought the city of Jerusalem to a standstill. In 2004, workers repairing a broken sewer pipe in the City of David area stumbled upon perfectly carved stone steps. Work was immediately halted to allow access for archaeologists Ronnie Reich and Eli Shukron. What they unearthed was the authentic Pool of Siloam, dating back to the Second Temple period. Until then, tourists had visited a small Byzantine pool built centuries later. But the original Siloam, the one to which Jesus sent the blind man to wash the mud from his eyes, was hidden under tons of rubble and earth accumulated over 2 millennia. During the cleanup of the area, archaeologists discovered a monumental pool with 3 sets of 5 steps each, allowing hundreds of people to descend simultaneously. But the most impressive detail was the discovery of coins and pottery in the cracks of the stone, dating precisely to the time of Jesus and the Great Jewish Revolt. Siloam was not just a water reservoir, it was a place of ritual purification for all Jews who came to the temple. The discovery demonstrates that the biblical narrative is grounded in busy public places, whose physical remains are still preserved. When archaeology reveals the original Siloam, it confirms that the site where Jesus performed his miracles is an authentic historical location. The blind man of Siloam did not live a legend. He washed his eyes in water that science can now analyze and catalog. Additional evidence: Peter's house in Capernaum. To conclude our investigation, we must travel to Capernaum, the fishing village that Jesus chose as his city during his ministry in Galilee. If Jesus was a true leader who profoundly influenced his followers, it would be natural for the place where he lived and taught to be preserved in the memory of the early Christians. And what archaeology has uncovered beneath the ruins of an ancient Byzantine church is astonishing to any historian. Excavations carried out by Franciscan archaeologists have revealed a succession of buildings stacked one on top of the other. At the deepest level, dating from the 1st century, they found a humble fisherman's dwelling built of black basalt stone. But this house was quite different from all the others around it. While the neighboring houses continued to be used for domestic purposes, this particular house, which tradition identifies as the House of Peter, underwent a radical transformation just a few decades after the death of Jesus. The walls were plastered with white lime, a very expensive and unusual material in a fisherman's house, and the floor was level. Archaeologists found layers of plaster with more than 100 inscriptions in Greek, Syriac, and Latin. And what did these inscriptions say? They contained prayers, the names of apostles, and phrases like, "Lord Jesus Christ, help your servant," and "Christ, have mercy." This is physical proof that, long before the great cathedrals existed, the first Christians had already transformed the house where Jesus stayed into a place of worship. They preserved the site because they knew exactly who had walked through those rooms. The house of Peter in Capernaum is not just a ruin, it is the archaeological link between the private life of Jesus and the birth of the greatest faith on the planet. It is evidence that the memory of Jesus was rooted in real geographical location that his friends made sure never to forget. If this video strengthened your faith and gave you more confidence in the Word, don't keep it to yourself. Share this documentary with someone who needs to know that our faith is not based on fable, but on real events and the footprints left by the Lamb himself.